Did you know that 4 million Americans left their jobs in April of 2021? Some experts are pointing to this trend as the Great Resignation, due to a post-pandemic world resulting from a workforce who has zoomed their jobs from home for more than a year. Hello, Action Taker. Welcome to Live Blissed Out, a podcast where I have inspirational and informational conversations with business owners and subject matter experts to help you get the scoop on a variety of topics. Tired of hesitating or making decisions without having the big picture? Want to be in the know? Then this is the place to go. I'm your host, Marissa Houston, helping you achieve bliss through awareness and action. So let's get to it. In this episode, Nina Cashman explores the real pain points that anyone faces while embarking on a major career or life transition. She'll also touch upon key factors that will help you move through your transitional hallway in order to create a clear roadmap that fuels you with confidence for your next career move. Nina is a PCC-Certified career transition and executive coach, lead trainer for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and founder of Pave Your Way, which is dedicated to helping business leaders develop visions beyond what's currently in front of them in order to pave their own unique paths toward success. Pave Your Way utilizes the core energy coaching method to explore the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that drive our reality so we can shift outcomes and generate new possibilities. Visit paveyourway.com to learn more and sign up for a free career-defining masterclass with a special offer at paveyourway.com/masterclass. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Nina, thanks for being on the show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Would you mind sharing exactly what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah. All we have to do is look at the last year and a half to recognize it's been a unique period for all of us. We've navigated the past year and a half, couple years in ways that are maybe different to how we're used to living our lives. And what's come out of it in my field as an executive coach and also a coach who works with people in career transition is the acknowledgement that all aspects of us have been impacted by how much the world has changed over the last couple of years. Our attitudes towards work and career are not immune to that. And there's this concept called the Great Resignation that maybe many people listening right now have heard of before, which is basically a movement that is a natural fallout over the course of how people have changed their work styles, more work from home, more exposure to their family. In some cases, longer hours because they're hopping from one Zoom meeting to the next. And what it has caused is a mindset shift for many people in terms of how they approach their work. Some people are realizing in spending more time closer to their families or even on their own that there's aspects to the way they've worked in the last several months that they like, and also maybe acknowledging aspects that they don't like. And either way, it leads to some illumination that, hey, maybe I want to do things differently. So what I wanted to talk to you today about is this idea that sometimes in life we transition. It would be normal after the shakeup of the last couple of years to maybe reassess the way we're doing things that could lead to a transition. And anytime we transition in our careers and in our lives, it can be a bit scary to leap into an unknown and exciting at the same time. So I want to speak with you today about those two aspects, the excitement and also the fear that comes from creating a new version of yourself in your career and your life.
I think this is such a timely conversation because we're living it right now. We're hearing in the news that people are leaving their jobs. We also see it around us. Wherever you go, there are job signs everywhere to the point that they're even trying to hire people on the spot because they can't seem to fill the position. People are much more aware of options that are available to them. Do you think that it could also be a situation of the grass is always greener, meaning right now they're in this honeymoon period where, okay, maybe I'm going to start a new job or a new business that I can try out. This is the time to do it. And it sounds amazing because I get to work from home and I get to call the shots and I don't have to worry about reporting to a boss. But the reality is it's also very hard. Launching a business and the length of time that it takes to make it successful and all the things that come along with it are not things that a lot of these folks have ever tried before. So now they're making this transition, and I'm wondering whether or not that will lead to disappointment, or if you think that regardless, it would be a benefit because they're learning something new and growing, and if they fail, well, they fail, and now they can at least know what they're dealing with.
There is a little bit of failure makes you smarter. Period. So my sense is you really can't go wrong whatever decision you make. And there is absolutely decisions that we all make at times where we believe the grass is going to be greener. And then we find out that the grass is kind of the same color it was from where we left. And in fact, there's similar livestock on the pasture from where we were before. And what I find is that typically tends to happen when people move in to the next step too fast without pausing and doing a little bit of assessment and exploration in terms of who am I and what do I want. When we move too quickly into a transition without really exploring those questions, what we find is we might be making a fear-based decision, which is more about, I just want to do something new and get away from what I have now, which often attracts a very similar situation because we're trying to move away from something as opposed to moving towards something new or moving towards something that feels more aligned with the answers to this question, who am I and what do I want? So I think you bring up a great point there that sometimes we do have this tendency to too quickly believe that the grass is going to be greener, and then we have this disruptive surprise of, oh, this is really similar. And this is why I'm advocating today to really capitalize on transition, capitalize on the discomfort of it, use it as an exploration period before you make that decision. And when you do, I think what you'll find is you often can create greener pastures.
So well said. My podcast is a lot about awareness. I use that word a lot, but it's really important. We have to research. We have to get information. We have to understand all the pros and cons. There are pros and cons to everything. And so you need to weigh that. And the only way you can make an educated decision in terms of what's right for you is to understand what's out there. And so jumping into something just from what you're seeing on the surface might not be a good approach to take, so to speak. Talk to maybe a professional or get more insight into exactly what they want. That way, they are minimizing the risk. There's always going to be risk. That's not anything we can avoid. And I agree with you 100%. Learning comes from making mistakes. We're all going to do it and we'll continue to do it. But the idea is to minimize that risk so that you're going in and not getting surprised unexpectedly over something that you could have understood if you had taken the time to do more research.
There were a couple words that you brought up that are really important, I think, to address. The research out there, I would turn on its head and say, actually, it's research in there, meaning inside of you. Many of us traditionally think that all of our answers are going to come from external sources, from what the media tells us, from what other people tell us, from people who we deem as smarter than us, who have higher degrees, tell us we should, air quotes, do with our lives. You also use the words, there's more to things than what's on the surface. I agree with that wholeheartedly. That if you really want to shift your external reality, if you really want to draw in something greater to yourself, then actually what needs to happen is not the research out there. That will naturally unfold as you become aware of what it is you actually want. Your mind and attention will naturally gravitate in your outward research towards those things. What most people are skipping, though, traditionally in career transition is a self-assessment and reconsidering the idea that, oh my gosh, over time, we as human beings, our values shift. We change the way we look at life based on life events. such as, for instance, in my life, having children changed my outlook on life completely. And that was an internal shift. In the past 2 years, a global pandemic and all the ways it's caused us to change the way we do life also would absolutely have an impact on some of our belief systems. And so to move forward and make major decisions in our lives before we reassess and reconnect with what's happening inside would be to create an external reality based on a past version of ourselves instead of getting present with who am I currently. And that's what I am most interested in when I'm working with clients on career transition. It's not the traditional approach of let's research and find out what your parachute is. It's more about, you know what, maybe it's time you stop asking the experts. Maybe it's time you stop seeking for answers from other people that only you can answer. And all I'm going to do is ask you those questions that really actually only you can answer and give you some space to listen to yourself, because no one can do your life the way you can, period. And I think a lot of us lose sight of that, especially in the midst of a career transition, because it's scary. And so what do we do when we're scared? We reach almost for anyone to tell us anything. And then we end up taking sometimes really bad advice because we're not listening to our gut. And that's the part that's most interesting to me when it comes to career transition. You are the wisest guide of your life, not me, not anyone else out there. You are. And that reconnection process is really important.
In every situation, I look at it this way. You have 3 choices. You can put up with it, you can change it, or you can get out. The other piece of that is you need to understand yourself. And I completely agree with what you said. We evolve. We become different versions of ourselves as we progress in life. And through our experiences and the mistakes we made, our viewpoints change. And that's absolutely expected. How do people become self-aware? What I find is that they are so busy with life. There's a lot of routine going on, right? We wake up in the morning, I got to get the kids to school, I got to check my emails, I got to do X, Y, Z, got a list of things. And you just feel like you're on this hamster wheel where you're just doing things because they're expected of you. And you never really get a chance to look inward and spend time doing that. I think many people want to, but what happens is they feel so exhausted at the end of the day that they'll end up turning on that funny show or anything that's going to get their minds off anything serious because they're exhausted. And the truth is, we have to be very self-aware in order to improve ourselves, to see where we're at, what we're good at, what we want out of life. Where do we go to start that and help us get there?
Such a great question. This online group coaching program that I built is called the Pave Challenge. Pave stands for presence, acceptance, visualization, execution. One of the first aspects of navigating a career or major life transition that is presented in this online coaching program is the concept of presence. And it addresses exactly what you're referring to here. All of us, not just you listening, not just me, at least most of us in the Western world are very used to this rhythm of the hamster wheel. We're very used to keeping ourselves busy. And honestly, I feel like the world promotes that too, especially when it comes to career transition. A lot of the advice you're going to get is get your resume out there. You got to send this many resumes out every single day. And this is what I suggest at the top of that program is giving ways to get present with yourself or tools to learn how to get off that hamster wheel first before you make any move, before you submit any resume, before you have any networking call, is to get really present with yourself. And part of how we do that is just awareness that we are on a hamster wheel. When we recognize that and we give ourselves the option to step off of it, that awareness alone enables us to step off of it. Sometimes, though, what it requires is just building in pauses in our week where we actually are not focused on actions and to-do lists, but we're actually focused on mindful inaction pauses in our day where we can just let things go for a moment. Because If you're always busy, if you're always in a to-do list, it's very, very hard to pay attention to what's happening inside. So I would say my program really digs into it, and that's actually the first module. How do you develop presence? We all have access to it at all times. I mean, we're with ourselves all the time, so certainly we can access our internal world at all times. The bigger question is, why aren't we doing it? And that's what we begin to address before we ever get to execution, which is the last phase of the program. Execution is absolutely important. We just want to make sure that when we're executing, it's actually in tune with who we are and what it is we actually want. And we don't always know that when we stay on the hamster wheel.
You're right. And I think that COVID was kind of a forced pause in a sense that we were living that life, just the routines that we're used to having, everybody driving back and forth from work, almost robotic. It's funny because I used to look at the freeway and I'd see all the cars jammed in there at the same time every day. They're going back and forth, north and south. You know, people are heading home. And COVID stopped all that. It was almost like somebody snapped their fingers from a trance. And now people are seeing things in a different way. And that, I think, is what's forcing people to make different decisions that we've never seen people make before.
Exactly. And that's some of the beauties that have transpired over this new way of living that we've all experienced. Yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs with it. I would say most people would recognize some hardships with it. And so often when our lives are disrupted, or often when there's even destruction in the world, it gives this opportunity to reevaluate, reset, and course correct how we want to do things. I know for myself, just even slowing things down in the family in terms of how we obligate our time and how we fill our time as a family was readjusted. And we don't find ourselves scrambling quite as much as we did pre-COVID. We easily could. As the world's opened up, there's a lot of opportunity to fill our time endlessly. After experiencing, though, the exact opposite of that for quite some time, you start to realize how nice it feels when you have a little bit more ownership in terms of how you're filling your time. And it gives you a possibility to have more of an influence over your world. And this is what's happening for many of us in our careers, too. This introduction to a different way of doing things has gotten many of us thinking about, hey, maybe there's elements to the last couple of years that I want to apply moving forward as I redirect the way I live my life. And this is also for people, a lot of the people I work with have a lot of great life experience and a lot of great work experience. And oftentimes there comes a point in your career where you begin to recognize your own value and how good you are at what you do. And how, if you really stop to think about it, you could apply it in any way if you chose to. And this is where we begin to feel really empowered, while also recognizing that the precursor to making those sorts of decisions, moving up in a company, taking new jobs, starting a business, as you said at the start of the podcast, can be scary too. And so we really want to watch out for some of the belief systems that shut us down from moving forward.
I was wondering, Nina, what do you foresee are some big shifts that are going to be happening when it comes to people's way of living, career-wise? Are there any trends or things that you are anticipating might happen with people leaving the traditional workforce like they are today?
I am not a societal analyst. I can go off of my gut and I can say to kind of stick to my lane in terms of what I do. I do see and have seen over the past couple of years. It's interesting, when we first went into lockdown mode here in the U.S., or at least where I am in Colorado, I would have thought as a coach that I was done. I wasn't going to have clients, and I would have never expected how much my business would actually boom during COVID. And it did. It actually exploded in ways. And so what I would say is that's an indicator that more and more people during this time are recognizing the need to invest in themselves. And I'm not just talking about investing in themselves in external ways, but recognizing how useful it is to have space in their lives to be somewhat contemplative when it comes to matters of the heart, the gut, and the mind. Because if you think about it, who in your world actually gives you space in a very neutral way to talk about what's on your mind and in your heart and in your soul. Because of this hamster wheel scenario, there's not a lot of room for it. So if there's one shift I am seeing in the professional world, it's the ever-evolving openness that corporate cultures are taking when it comes to the profession of coaching and mental health, and how important the physical and mental and emotional health of their employees is to the organization at large. It's not sustainable to expect someone to stay on a hamster wheel if you're not investing in their humanity. And so I can speak, I guess, from that perspective is a trend that I've really seen grow over the last couple of years, and I just see it likely to get stronger and stronger.
People now have choices. They're able to reflect more, get clarity on what they're looking for, what they really want out of life. And because of that, they can shift gears and do something different. Before COVID, that was something that people didn't even consider. They were just on that path and they were sticking to it. And I think that reflection is really causing people to reassess what they want out of life.
Yeah, and it can be exciting, even though it can also feel daunting. I also want to highlight that when we're talking about transition, it doesn't always mean leaving something. To your three choices before, sometimes staying wherever you are seems like a great option, and moving within the same organization or deciding to throw your hat in the ring for that position that's above you, that too can feel like a scary transition. It's embarking on something new. And sometimes you have this urge inside to start something on your own, to go out on business on your own. And of course, that's a leap too. That is absolutely a transition as well. Changing our relationships in life, deciding to evolve a relationship or leave it is a transition. And all of these things have one thing in common. And I believe that's the fear of the unknown. And oftentimes when we're in fear, we want to react. We want to get out of that because that's an uncomfortable feeling for most of us. And what I really want to advocate for is sit with that discomfort for a while, because there's a lot of definition and knowledge and insight within that discomfort. And if you sit with it instead of trying to move past it too quickly, it can often lead to some golden door opportunities that maybe you would have never seen or thought about without embracing those discomfort zones. And that is really why I built this online group coaching program, was to capitalize on the space of what I like to call the transitional hallway. Instead of promoting that you move past it as quickly as possible by taking my career advice and dusting off your resume and working on interview skills, all these common approaches that I think a lot of career counselors use and are useful if that's what you want, if you're ready for that, if you're ready for that level of execution. No one is really addressing, though, this space of maybe now is not the best time to take concrete action. That will come after you've sat in this hallway for a while and after you've looked past that discomfort and you've reconnected with what could have changed within you before you try to move into that next thing. That's what the PAVE Challenge, this group coaching program, is all about.
Sometimes we think that the answer is elsewhere when it could be staring you in the face. You could be in an office environment where things have been pretty stagnant, but now everybody's left and all of a sudden you become the head honcho in your department. You know what I mean? And now all these doors are opening up and opportunities that weren't available before. There's so many positive ways, even COVID being as terrible as it has been and still is in many ways. There are a lot of things that we did get out of it that are useful for many of us, businesses that have done really well. Just being open to all sides of that and understanding that, but it starts with that awareness piece.
All great points.
How do you define bliss, Nina?
To me, bliss is just purified contentment. To me, the word contentment has this unattached feeling to it, where there's no expectation of what an experience should be. It's just content with whatever is. And when we exist in those spaces, it's bliss.
Given that our time is finite, how do you plan to make the most of yours?
To be present, as we talked about, as much as possible. I heard a saying once that I love, which is the present is called the present because it really is a gift. It is where we are the most brilliant. And when we can be present with those we love, with our family, present in the amazing work that we do, that is when our brilliance comes to life and we have the most to offer the world. And at times it can be hard to remain present because we've got these little things called nagging thoughts and emotions that can really pull us away at times from the present moment. Recognizing, though, that every single moment that we get to exist here on earth is absolutely a gift is motivation to just make the most of it by being right here, right now.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew sooner?
That is such a good question. Oh, there's so many things. Where would I land?
And I selfishly am asking it because I want to learn things that potentially could help all the listeners, because I think that all of us have that light bulb moment.
You know, what's flying in for me is this foundation principle that comes from my school of training, IPEC, which stands for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And there's a foundation principle that says each one of us is greater and wiser than we appear to be. And when you really connect with that, what that's telling us is that the answer to all questions lie within, which is this acknowledgement and recognition that each one of us are so wise, especially when it comes to being you. No one can do you like you. And if I would have known that in middle school and high school, I think I probably would have experienced more joy at those times. And I suppose there are times in our lives where we got to go through experiencing who we are not or trying to be someone else or comparing ourselves to others in order to realize how much better it is just to be you, whoever you are, and to recognize that because only you can do you, you've got the answers. And so to trust ourselves a little bit more is something that probably would have been trajectory changing, life changing. I'm not saying better or worse, but probably would have made me a different person had I understood that earlier in my life.
How do people learn more about what you do, and how do they get a hold of you?
So I would say the best way, if anything resonated with you today in terms of the PAVE Challenge, a great way to learn more about that course is to take the free masterclass. And not only does the masterclass step you through what the PAVE Challenge is about, it also gives you a lot of great free nuggets to utilize right away if you are contemplating or about ready to, or in the midst of a career transition. And the way to access it is to go to paveyourway.com/masterclass. So that's www.paveyourway.com/masterclass. And if you sign up there, it'll give you instant access to experience that masterclass right away.
Thank you. I know that I'm walking away with a lot of nuggets, so I know our listeners are going to feel the same way. And I just appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I've enjoyed our conversation so much as well.
That's a wrap for this episode of Live Blissed Out. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Nina Cashman for joining us on the show. If you have a question or comment for a future episode, all you have to do is go to speakpipe.com/LBOVM or click the link in the show notes to leave a brief audio message. If you find value in our show, please visit liveblисsedout.com to reach out, subscribe, and share on social media. This show is made possible through listeners like you. Thank you. So long for now, and remember to keep moving forward.